Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're digging into something, well, maybe a little unexpected at first glance.
Yeah, what do we got?
It's an ancient legal passage from the book of Numbers, specifically chapter 35, verses 22 through 34.
Okay, Numbers 35. Heady stuff, usually.
It can be,
Yeah.
but we're looking at it through the lens of a recent quiet time reflection. So like someone's personal take on it.
Ah, okay, so not just the historical text, but someone really wrestling with it.
Yeah,
That's our source material then, those notes and reflections.
exactly. And that's what makes it interesting for this deep dive, I think. They offer this perspective that, goes beyond just the rules themselves.
Gotcha. So what's the mission then? What are we trying to pull out of this?
Well, the goal is to unpack what this ancient instruction manual basically says about some pretty profound, timeless themes. Things like God's presence,
Okay.
how our actions affect the space around us, the community, and also the deep connection between justice and living a pure life.
So finding the relevant insights for us today from this old text and these reflections on it.
That's the plan, extracting those key insights.
All right, let's dive in. So Numbers 35, verses 22 to 34. We need to set the scene a bit, right? The legal context.
Yeah, definitely. What's the core issue it's addressing?
It's tackling a really serious situation for any community. What do you do when someone dies by someone else's hand?
Right. And this is part of those instructions God gave the Israelites as they were getting ready to settle in the Promised Land.
Exactly. And the passage makes a really crucial distinction right off the bat.
Between accidental killing and, well, intentional murder.
Precisely. It lays out what happens if someone was killed unintentionally. Like maybe they were pushed suddenly, but there wasn't any, bad blood beforehand.
Or maybe someone threw something without meaning to hit anyone, or dropped a heavy stone without seeing the person below. Those kinds of scenarios.
Yeah, accidents, things done without malice, without planning. The passage outlines a specific process for that.
And the community, the congregation, they had a big role, didn't they?
A vital role. They were the ones who had to judge the situation. They'd stand between the person who caused the death, the manslayer, and the avenger of blood.
That's usually a relative of the person who died, seeking justice.
Right. And if the congregation confirmed the death was accidental, their job was actually to protect the killer.
Protects them.
Through these designated cities of refuge. It was a specific form of protection.
Ah, okay. Sanctuaries, basically. A place the accidental killer could flee to for safety from that avenger of blood.
Exactly. But, and this is important, it wasn't like a permanent get-out-of-jail-free card.
No. There were rules, I imagine.
Oh, yeah. The rule was strict. The manslayer had to stay inside the boundaries of that city of refuge until a very specific thing happened. The death of the current high priest, the one anointed with the holy oil. His death marked the end of the manslayer's exile.
Wow. So they were tied to the life of the high priest. What if they just left the city before he died?
Big consequences. If the avenger of blood found the manslayer outside the city limits before the high priest died and killed them,
Then what?
then the avenger was not considered guilty of murder. The protection was totally conditional on staying put.
Inside that safe zone.
Right. Only after the high priest died could they leave the city of refuge and, go back to their home, their land, their old life.
Okay, so that's accidental death.
Mm-hmm.
How does it contrast with intentional murder?
Well, the passage is pretty stark there. A murderer. They were to be put to death. Simple as that.
But there was a condition for that too, wasn't there? About witnesses.
Yes, very important. It couldn't just be one person's accusation. It required the testimony of multiple witnesses. More than one person had to provide evidence to confirm the crime and carry out that penalty.
Okay, and the notes you mentioned, they highlighted something fascinating about ransom, right? No financial way out.
Exactly. This is really interesting. For both the convicted murderer facing death and the accidental killer stuck in the city of refuge, there was absolutely no possibility of paying a ransom. No money could buy a murderer out of the death penalty, and no money could buy the manslayer out of the city of refuge before the high priest died.
So the consequences, whether death or exile, were inescapable through wealth.
Right. And this is where the reflection notes really shift the perspective. It's arguing this isn't just a set of ancient laws about crime.
Okay. What else is it about?
The core reason behind all of it, the cities, the rules for manslaughter, the rules for murder, it was fundamentally about keeping the land itself pure.
The land. Why was the physical land so critical here?
Because God, who is holy, was choosing to live among his people. right there in the land with them.
Ah, okay. So the rules about shedding blood, even accidentally.
Were directly tied to the sacredness of that physical space. Because God's presence was there, it made the land holy ground, in a sense.
So how people treated each other, even accidentally causing death, it wasn't just a legal problem. It was like a theological problem about keeping the environment okay for a holy God to dwell in.
Exactly, you got it. And this whole idea is captured so powerfully in the key verse this reflection really focuses on, verse 34.
What does it say?
You shall not defile the land in which you live, in the midst of which I dwell, for I, the Lord, dwell in the midst of the people of Israel.
Wow. Okay. That really does cut right to the heart of it. God's basically saying, look, this place you live, it's special because I'm here with you, so don't mess it up.
Pretty much. Keep it clean, keep it just. That command, rooted in the reality of his dwelling presence, that's what the notes argue is the core message, and it applies way beyond that ancient legal system.
So how does that translate? What's the first big application they pull out?
It's this idea that God wants to live right in the middle of your life today, like right now.
Not just in a special building somewhere,
But in the everyday stuff, your apartment, your job, your relationships, he wants to be present there.
Okay. And if God is choosing to be present in those places,
then how we live in those places suddenly becomes way more significant, doesn't it? Our choices, our actions, they are literally shaping the environment where God is dwelling with us.
Huh. That really makes you think, doesn't it?
Yeah.
About your own space, your interactions. If God is right there in that, I don't know, that difficult meeting or that casual conversation, how does knowing that change things?
Well, it leads straight into the second main point from the notes. Your actions affect more than just you.
Right, like we saw in the passage. Even accidental harm had consequences.
Yeah, it had this ripple effect, impacting the whole community, needing specific steps. Why? Because what we do, even unintentionally sometimes, it impacts the people and the places around us.
So that thing you say without thinking, or that decision you make when you assume nobody's watching, it's not just happening in a bubble.
Nope. It ripples out. It touches others.
Okay. And the third idea?
It's drawn from how they had to deal with the harm caused. The idea that justice and restoration are like two sides of the same coin. They go hand in hand.
Because even for the accidental killing, there were procedures to address the wrong, right, to move towards making things right again.
Exactly. It wasn't just, oops, sorry, my bad, let's forget it. There were real steps. Fleeing to the city, living in exile, waiting for the high priest's death as a sort of reset point. Even unintentional harm needed this structure to restore balance, to deal with the pollution of the land, if you will.
To make things right as much as possible.
Yeah, which brings it to us today. When we mess up, whether we meant to hurt someone or not, the call isn't really to just hide or excuse it.
What is it then?
It's to, well, own it. To take responsibility and engage in that process sometimes really hard of working towards healing. Healing for the person hurt, for the community, and honestly for ourselves too.
Okay, so these ancient rules, these big principles, how do they actually hit the ground in our lives now? The notes had some questions, right, for reflection.
Yeah, some really direct ones. Like, they ask you to genuinely consider, is your life, the space you create around you, is it a place where God would feel, at home?
That goes right back to that defilement and dwelling idea. Is my life polluting the space where God wants to be?
And then it challenges you. Have you hurt someone? Intentionally or maybe not intentionally? And if so, what can you actually do to try and make it right?
Getting practical about that justice and restoration piece.
Mm-hmm. And finally, it prompts you to think, how does knowing, really believing that God is with you in your everyday life, at work, school, home, how does that actually change the way you live, the choices you make, how you relate to people?
It's not just a nice thought. It's supposed to have teeth.
Right. And the reflection even gets specific, thinking about different areas of life, especially maybe for, say, a young adult trying to figure things out.
Like where?
Like at work or school. Are you living with integrity? Are your choices reflecting God's presence, even when the boss isn't looking or the teacher isn't there?
That's challenging. Or in relationships.
Yeah. Are you taking responsibility when you cause harm, even if you didn't mean to? Or do you just brush it off? And
thinking bigger, like community-wide.
What can you do practically to help create spaces, whether that's a physical space or just, the atmosphere in a group, spaces where people feel safe, seen, valued?
That feels very connected to the idea of keeping the land pure or undefiled, creating a healthy environment.
Absolutely. It's kind of amazing, isn't it, how this ancient law about accidental killing in refuge cities can lead us straight to thinking about our integrity at work or how safe people feel in our communities today.
Yeah, it really highlights that those rules and numbers weren't just random. They were deeply rooted in this massive reality.
Yeah.
God dwelling among his people.
And that core principle, God's presence, it still shapes how we should understand our responsibility and how we ought to live. It shifts the focus
From just individual actions in isolation.
to the health and, the purity of the whole space, the community where God is present with us.
So wrapping this up, this deep dive into the notes on Numbers 35, it really connects the dots, doesn't it? It shows how an ancient law dealing with unintentional death actually points to this incredibly powerful truth. That God's desire to dwell among us right here, right now, calls us to live lives marked by integrity, by an awareness of how we impact others.
And by a real commitment to seeking justice and restoration.
Yeah, not just for ourselves, but for the very spaces and communities we inhabit with him.
It's a profound implication, and maybe here's a final thought to chew on, stemming directly from that source material.
Okay, let's hear it.
If those ancient rules, the cities of refuge, the atonement for polluting the land, if they were so fundamentally tied to the reality of God literally dwelling among the Israelites back then, what does our belief, our Christian belief in God's present dwelling among us today through his Spirit, what does that mean for how we understand our responsibility to seek healing and purity and justice in the communities we live in right now?
Wow, that takes it right home. It's definitely something to mull over.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully this deep dive has given you all some rich food for thought for your own reflections.